Let's begin with prayer. Merciful God, we are hopelessly lost without you, yet we constantly leave you. Help us to recognize that we are yours, even as we so often live our lives oblivious. Help us humble ourselves this morning to hear your word in Scripture and be reminded of your gracious love that saves us every time. Amen. What did you give up for Lent? Maybe you don't choose to practice the spiritual discipline of fasting, but today is the first Sunday in Lent. And for 40 days, not counting Sundays, from Ash Wednesday until Easter, we observe a time of penitence and prayer. We humble ourselves. We confess our wrongs to God, make amends where we can. We change our behavior from the slow accretion of bad habits that have built up. We turn instead to practices more faithful to God's purposes for us. Above all, we acknowledge that we are human beings with limits. Or at least that's the plan. It takes a dedicated, intentional commitment of both time and mental willpower to observe Lent with devotion. Introspection, humility, and prayer do not come easily for most of us. That's why giving up the hard way. If we take a close look at the conversation between the woman who had not yet been given a name and the serpent in the story I read from Genesis, we can see just how subtle the start of a disaster can be. It's interesting to note from the beginning that the serpent is not tempting the woman to do anything. It is merely instigating a conversation with her, a very crafty conversation, one that raises questions and makes for missteps, but the serpent doesn't lie. Let's listen again. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animal that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God say, 'You shall not eat from any tree in the garden'?" And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, 'You shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die.'" So far, so good. And be reminded that the woman had not yet been created when God gave this no fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden prohibition to Adam. Adam must have relayed the warning to her. She did not get it firsthand. In fact, either she or Adam embellished it to say that not only could they not eat the fruit, but also they could not touch the fruit. In fact, God had been non-committal about their touching the fruit. They seemed to want to put a ring fence around it for self-protection. Then the serpent said to the woman with complete accuracy this next statement, "You will not die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." New information. The woman has some choices to make, and she is free to make them. What happens next? So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Did you notice that Adam was there the whole time? Really? He was with her. He could have spoken up. She did not tempt him. He was in on it from the beginning. He was thinking and deciding and choosing for himself right along with her. Then, sure enough, just as the serpent had said it would happen, they get wise, but not quite in the way they had expected. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths for themselves. Have you ever tried to fashion a loincloth from a fig leaf? They must have been pretty embarrassed and really desperate. Uh-oh, how can we hide ourselves from ourselves? Quick! What did the woman do that was wrong? She knew about the prohibition, but then she got some new information. She reasoned it out. Attractive fruit, edible, organic, makes one wise. Why not give it a try? And even Adam agreed with the whole rationale. He was with her. So what's wrong with their choice? And here's another thing. Why did God put the one forbidden tree in the middle of the garden? These two brand new, beautifully fashioned human beings had to walk by it every day. If God did not want them to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge, couldn't God have tucked it away in some far corner of the garden? If it was really toxic, wouldn't God have kept it out of sight of God's beloved, created human beings? What is it about the things we cannot have? They keep showing up right under our noses somehow. Temptation is a terrible thing. And for some reason, we always pitch our tent right up under the one thing that can never be ours. The one thing we reach for but cannot attain. We know we cannot exceed our limits. We know we cannot have it all. We know that some things and some people we cannot change, but we keep right on trying to have things and control things and change people anyway. For some, accepting limits may sound defeatist. It certainly is countercultural. Why do we have to settle? What kind of all-loving God would set limits? Why do we follow a religious tradition that says, no, you cannot have it all because all belongs only to God? It seems unfair. We struggle with this idea of accepting limitations all the more when the fruit that is pleasing to the eye is not something bad, but rather the promise of something good, like wisdom from the tree of knowledge. What's not to like about the desire for wisdom? Well, maybe it was more than wisdom at stake that day in the garden. Maybe we need to recognize God's greater wisdom and the fact that we are not and never will be God. The error we share with the woman who would later be named Eve lies in her failure, and often our failure, to recognize that God, and only God, has ultimate wisdom and understanding over all things, over all creation. We humans can never have this unsurpassed perspective. We cannot make decisions from the purest motives without being blinded by our own limitations, by our own selfish motivations, which may not be for the good of the world. Our human decisions sometimes have unintended consequences that we cannot possibly foresee. Adam and Eve encountered several unintended consequences. The first of them was shame. They ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge and discovered their nakedness. They were exposed and vulnerable, and they became crafty, like the serpent, who you may recall was more crafty than any other wild animal in the garden. The wordplay is wonderful here because crafty and naked have the same word stem in Hebrew. Adam and Eve disobeyed God and found themselves suddenly naked and thus vulnerable, and suddenly crafty and thus denied their vulnerability with nothing more than a fig leaf. It was the world's first cover-up. and now we do it all the time. We humans still make shameful decisions, and our first reaction is always to hide the evidence. We turn our eyes to the ground, we blush with embarrassment, we hide our faces from God. Human limits are the ones that God sets for us. Yet in accepting our limits, we can still grow and strive to reach our fullest potential, to be the best persons that God always intended us to be. We just have to be forever mindful that God intended us to be natural and authentically human, the way we were born, without the steroid enhancer, without the political connections, without skimming the profits, without being unfaithful to our partner, without forgetting the less fortunate, without worshiping our material gains instead of worshiping God. So here's my take on the garden story and what makes it so inspired and so relevant for our lives. Consider this. What if God purposefully placed the tree with the forbidden fruit in the middle of the garden in order to allow God's good creation, God's good woman and good man, to make up their own minds about whether to eat from it? What if God compelled them to make a choice and to live by their decision? They could eat any fruit in the garden except for the one in plain sight. God gave them the freedom to disobey, knowing full well they would let curiosity get the better of them. But God would only have done this, I suggest to you, so that God could give God's ultimate gift to us, the one thing we do not even know that we need until we sincerely believe that all is lost and that it is too late. Think about it this way. God made us good, with good minds and the ability to reason, but God's good gifts to us also open the door to our choosing to separate from God, and in disobeying God, we distance ourselves further from God's faithful, saving, loving embrace. We seem to be our own worst enemies in this regard, and it takes an extraordinary welcome to bring us back. This story of the Garden of Eden is not so much a story of evil and sin as it is the story of a failed humility. But because God is good, and God made us good, there is a happy ending to this tale. It really does not end as harshly as years of misconstrued, patriarchal, sexually conflicted church father interpretation would have us believe. Yes, Adam and Eve made a mistake, and yes, God found them out, hiding behind the tree of the garden in their little fig loincloths, trembling with fear. They were afraid, like any of us would be afraid if caught with our hand in the till, or with our crafty, naked vulnerability exposed, or our unkind, cutting remark gone viral on the internet. But Adam and Eve did not achieve the wisdom of knowing all things in eating from the knowledge tree. They were human, and they were limited. They could only distinguish good from evil. They did not understand proportionality. They had no concept of the extent of God's mercy, the boundlessness of God's love, and possibly neither do we. Why then does God allow us to fail? Why does God make it so easy for us to make the wrong choice, to give in to temptation, to be disobedient, to lose our faith in God and replace it with faith in things? Perhaps it is because God wants us to live lives of freedom and thereby to choose to love God freely in gratitude for this freedom. If God had wanted to make us mere worshiping puppets, God could very well have created us that way. But God gave us the human dignity of freedom instead. When we go astray from the moral values that God has set out for us as thinking, feeling human beings, we are punished in one way or another, whether it be by a guilty conscience or a lost friendship or a public shaming or a criminal indictment. But if we choose God and we accept our limits and commit to follow Christ, the light, the truth, and the way, we open the door to second chances, to forgiveness and acceptance, to be in a place of reconciliation and peace of mind between us and God and in all our human relationships and beyond. Adam and Eve were punished by God even as they were loved by God. God cast them out of the garden to toil and work by the sweat of their brows, to experience enmity and pain, inequality and fear, to know regret and to know shame. But despite all this, God never stopped loving them. In fact, God forgave them and was merciful in the end. This is the good news part. It comes at the very end of the story. You might want to go home and read the rest of it after church, but here it is. God cast out Adam and Eve from the garden, true, but before they leave to go out into that dark, cold world outside, God made garments for them. God clothed them with shearling coats and kid gloves. It's a tender moment. God sent them out punished, but with dignity, penitent, but free from shame, with warm bodies and warmer hearts. God sent them away loved. God's paradox is that God cast us out with a lifeline, the saving grace that keeps us from being outcast and lost forever. God gives us the freedom to make our own choices and loves us enough to be there to help pick up the pieces when our choices go terribly wrong. God's paradox is God's lifeline, the saving grace of Jesus Christ, the merciful love of God. Struggling with temptation this Lenten season? God will grant you the grace to try again. You decide. It's never too late. Choose love.